Matt Taibbi, the journalist who, together with Elon Musk, broke the Twitter files, exposes the legacy media on the Joe Rogan show. We're going to see both Matt and Joe's analysis of what's happened to the lamestream media, why independent journalism is the wave of the future, and why the days of the legacy media are indeed coming to an end. You're not going to want to miss this.
Companies now know that their audiences will forgive them for making mistakes as long as the mistakes are in the right direction.
Right, as long as it's ideologically correct.
As long as it's ideologically correct. So there was a whole generation of reporters who were raised like me. Like our whole thing was the night before we published something, we couldn't sleep because we were afraid of that one thing that would be fucked up in the report that somebody would catch the next day, and that might end your career, right? Like if you got something really, really badly wrong, it was potentially a career-ending thing, especially if you made some kind of ethical mistake in forgetting to check something. So that terror was common to all reporters until recently. Now all of a sudden, when you make a really, really bad mistake, your audience is probably going to be fine with it. They don't punish you for it in the same way. And they've basically brought in a whole generation of people who have this ethos of, well, so what if it's wrong? Which is why all these people no longer have faith in these companies, and they can't see it. It's amazing that they can't see it. But people are leaving these companies. They're no longer trusting them. And they don't see that correlation, which is incredible to me.
So that's a fascinating observation coming from Matt Taibbi, and others such as Douglas Murray have made similar arguments. There was a time when facts really mattered in journalism. We can all remember it. We always knew that the media skewed left. There are historical reasons for that. But regardless, there still was some very reliable reporting. And what Matt is pointing out here is that those days are over for the legacy media. More and more legacy media news outlets are trading in news for narrative. More and more media outlets are sounding like woke leftist echo chambers rather than critical reporters and journalists. And this is largely because of the rise of what's called advocacy journalism. Advocacy journalism begins with the partisan narrative or the frame that they want to advance, and then they fit the so-called facts into that frame. So advocacy journalism almost inevitably commits the fallacy known as confirmation bias. And confirmation bias is when you deliberately configure information and data specifically to support one's prior beliefs and values. So it's basically a kangaroo court. And this is why more and more people see the so-called information coming out of the legacy media as no more trustworthy than so-called scientific data coming from Philip Morris or Marlboro cigarettes. So what does a journalist or a pundit who really wants to share reliable information do? Well, that's where the rise of independent journalists come in.
They had that hesitation because we're raised in media, in professional corporate media, to be terrified of leaving the fold. Now, I actually came up through alternative media, so I wasn't afraid of leaving it. I had my own newspapers when I lived overseas. The idea of being out in the wilderness didn't frighten me so much. So when I moved to Substack, I just thought this is probably going to be cool. It's probably going to work, right? But that's a lot of people who came up, you do think, wow, I'm never gonna get back into the club. And if I don't make enough money, that's it. That's it for me. Which is why they're staying. But look at how much success they've had. The audience out there is huge. Yeah. They're probably making more money than they ever dreamed they would make. And there's opportunities to do all kinds of amazing things now because of that.
I love that. I love it because both Matt Taibbi and Joe Rogan, they really understand what's going on here. Technically, it's the rise of what's called the network society. Now, we talk about the network society all the time on this channel. Our world is going through a massive transition where virtually all major news events are first reported via video shot by an eyewitness's phone. Gone are the satellite truck days. The first reporters on the scene are citizen journalists. Everybody with a smartphone is a cameraman. Everybody with a social media platform is a pundit. And in such a world, information is radically decentralized from the legacy news media outlets and dispersed among the masses. It's technically known as the democratization of knowledge and information. And now independent journalists can bypass the old big media gatekeepers in a manner comparable to the way email or texting bypasses the post office. And so independent content creators are indeed the wave of the future, all as the legacy media increasingly falters. Hey gang, with the fake news out there, how do you know which sources to trust? Which sources are real news and not the woke propaganda? Well, it's Christmas come early here at Turley Talks because I've got something that's perfect for you. My fake news antidote. I've compiled my personal research resources to help people stay informed and feel optimistic about the future of our nation. Plus, they're also designed to give you the tools to identify propaganda and false information so that you can make well-informed decisions on important issues. Right now, when you sign up for a 14-day free trial to my Insiders Club, you'll get my fake news antidote as a completely free gift. Insiders Club grants you access to more content where I dive into all the things I can't discuss here on YouTube, plus other trainings, resources, and more. So don't miss out on this amazing opportunity. Click on that link below and sign up now for a 14-day free trial of my Insiders Club and get my list of news research resources as your free gift at insidersclub.turleytalks.com.
And it's hard. It's hard to just say, no, I'm going to be independent. But this is the time. This is the best time ever to be independent.
Yeah, no, and that's why it is a very hard decision for people to walk away and go independent and do the thing, what I did, what Glenn did, what Crystal and Kyle did. But it works, and the other choice, staying with traditional media, is increasingly not a good bargain for you. Not only, is the piece of the pie there getting smaller and smaller all the time because their ratings are getting worse, the advertising revenue is dropping off, but the ideological conformity in those organizations is getting worse, and that is something that never used to exist before, or at least not to this degree, anywhere near this degree. So you're going to be miserable doing that. You might as well do the job the way you want to do it correctly, and get paid in a commensurate way for doing it.
So there you have the business model rationale for the rising movement of independent journalists like Matt and Barry Weiss and Glenn Greenwald and the like. The legacy media is suffering from two angles, okay, as it were. There are two distinct yet interrelated debilitative pressures going on journalists. First and foremost, there's less money than ever, and that's, of course, because the legacy media is shrinking. The Pew Research Center reported a study some months back that found that United States newspapers have shed half of their employees, half of their newsrooms since 2008. If you could believe it, just to underscore what's going on here, newspaper circulation today here in the United States is at its lowest it's been since the 1940s. Newspaper circulation in the United States today is the lowest it's been since World War II. And this is despite their online presence and paywalls and subscriptions and all of that. As I understand it, for the last 28 straight consecutive years, the mainstream print media has declined in readership in every single year in those nearly 30 years. Business Insider published some stats from 2019. That year alone, layoffs in the legacy media hit upwards of 8,000. Again, to underscore, the number of media jobs that were slashed in 2019 were more than the total media jobs lost in the previous 5 years combined. Obviously, we've seen it with the CNN stat, the bloodbath that's happened with the layoff. Who News is calling it a gut punch of layoffs. Among the victims, perhaps most dramatically at CNN, it's the entire staff of HLN, which is a spinoff of CNN owned by CNN Global. The entire HLN staff has been nixed. So what's happening here? Well, aside from the structural changes going on in our society, like with the network society, the legacy media has experienced an implosion in trust. And it's no secret where that implosion in trust is coming from. Poll after poll shows that a significant majority of news consumers believe the legacy media is politically biased in its coverage. Now, when all is said and done, the success of modern journalism is built on trust. The only way modern journalism works is if audiences trust the news outlets as reliable mediators of information. If there's a significant doubt that arises from that, if audiences begin to suspect that they're being fed partisan talking points, they're going to look elsewhere for their daily diet of information. So the two pressures are interrelated there. The collapse in audience and the ideological pressures end up reinforcing one another. The more ideological the media becomes, the smaller its audience. The smaller its audience, the more it becomes ideologically fringe.
I think there's a bunch of people, though, that haven't established a large following that are worried, rightly so, of being lost in this. You know? So I don't think this is available to anyone. It's obviously available to you and to Glenn and to Jimmy Dore and a lot of these other people that they've already gathered up a large, loyal audience because they know that they can trust these people. Or the people rather know they can trust them to be honest and to just give their take on things. But there's a lot of people that they're stuck because, you know, they're not really well known and they're kind of in this system and they're realizing while they're in this system that it's pretty fucked. And you have two choices. Either you try to fight against it and you might get ostracized, or you try to conform and then you get lost.
Right.
And then you become what you despise.
Right.
Which is more common than not, right?
Yeah, I think that's what's happening. Either they're moving the people out, which you see at an organization like the New York Times, where they're just kind of moving the old guard out, the old traditional reporting types, and they had a lot of really amazing reporters at the New York Times, people who really knew how to do the job, and they're just kind of being pushed out, whether for one reason or another. Or the other thing is you stay in, and gradually the mindset takes hold of you, and you get lost mentally, and I think that's what's happening to a lot of people. I mean, I knew Rachel back in her Air America days. We were friends once, sort of, and it's amazing to me what's happened.
Now, Matt just mentioned there Rachel Maddow, who started on Air America some years back and then moved over to MSNBC. And for him, she's a perfect example of what happens when you get so embedded into this woke neo-Marxist media environment and you just get comparably mentally lost in it. I think of someone like Joe Scarborough, who used to be actually a bona fide conservative. I just think of how he's been at MSNBC, one of the single most outrageously far-left organizations out there, how he's been there for the last 2 decades, and the bizarre political and even personal metamorphosis that he's undergone. I think Matt and Joe Rogan are identifying it here. I know if you heard about it, but Scarborough today actually compared Elon Musk to Vladimir Putin for daring to call for the prosecution of Fauci. It was one of the most force-stretched comparisons imaginable, but it's all just par for the course for this guy. And both Taibbi and Rogan are identifying what's behind it. You either leave this woke neo-Marxist echo chamber or you actually become a part of it. And the beauty in all of this is because of the rise of the network society. No one who's a content creator, who has a message to share with the world, who can offer some insightful and penetrating analysis and perspective on the world's events, no one has to be beholden to these neo-Marxist gatekeepers anymore. The network society is allowing us to bypass these gatekeepers the way email bypasses the post office. Matt Taibbi and Joe Rogan are the wave of the future. And Joe Scarborough and Rachel Maddow are destined to be utterly forgotten. As always, make sure to smack that bell and subscribe button. You'll definitely want to check out my latest video on Liz Cheney getting exposed as a total fraud with the latest J6 committee leaks. You're not going to want to miss it, so make sure to click on that link, and I'll see you over there. God bless.